that little post ended up with 70 different people from around the world publishing the first book of knowledge for customer experience, over 300 pages.
Hi, so our guest today is Greg Melia, who is the CEO of Customer Experience Professionals Association, also called CXPA. CXPA is a global nonprofit that works with customer experience professionals through their journey, helping them learn, share their learnings, and consistently get better at what they do. So, really looking forward to talking to you, Greg, and learning from your very vast and rich experience. Hi, Greg.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Absolutely, Greg. So, where are you right now, and how are you doing today?
Where am I today? In Columbia, South Carolina, and it's a special day. Today's my birthday, so hey, thanks for making time to be together.
Happy birthday, Greg. Thanks for taking time out on your birthday. And, it's a special conversation then, right? Great. Thank you. Thanks a lot. And have a good birthday.
Thank you.
Great. So, I was looking through your, work experience. You've done so many things, right? I mean, you started with Ritz-Carlton, which was a customer facing role. You went into program development. You worked on organizational development / management, and finally at CXPA, right? So, can you talk a bit about how CXPA and customer experience happened, right? I think there's a running thread of customer experience through your career, but how did CXPA happen, and how did customer experience, explicitly happen at this juncture in your career?
Thank you. Yeah, when I think back to college and many of the books that are on the shelf behind me, I used to describe myself as sitting on top of a wall between psychology and sociology and anthropology. I'm very interested in the way that groups come together and have a shared mission to accomplish something. And that's part of the reason why I always was very interested in association management. I was always very interested in hospitality in that space too. But customer experience, when I went to college, customer experience wasn't a term that was widely used. As a matter of fact, I think it was first used in the mid 90s by Lou Carbone. And so it was sort of neat when I finally learned about CXPA that there is an organization of people who are passionate about uniting their customers, their companies together to serve their customers, their employees, and the organization's bottom line. So I found CX and CXPA by accident, as many people did, but it was also very intentional because I believe that if we make the world a better place through getting better results for customers and getting results that are good for both business and good for the customer.
Makes sense. I'd love to talk more about your interest in psychology and how that interplays with CXPA, right? I was going through your profile quickly, and I read quickly about your interest in the concept of equifinality, which I knew slightly about in the past, but I went ahead and read a bit more about it after reading it on your profile. So can you talk a bit more about psychology in general, equifinality, maybe if it is relevant in the context of customer experience, and how psychology and CX actually interplay and intertwine?
That's awesome. I love that. I don't know where you found my mention of equifinality, but I will share that one of the proudest moments as a young father was my daughter listening to a song on the radio, and it was talking about all the different ways a man might sneak out of his apartment and go meet up with his girlfriend.
Wow.
And she said, Dad, this song is about equifinality. And I said, this is what we need to teach our kids, and this is what we need to keep in mind. There isn't one way to do things. There are many, many ways. If we know the end goal of making a better result for the customer and for the employee and for the organization's bottom line, we have to keep in mind that there's a whole number of different systems that are involved. And that's really where the connection came, was systems theory and equifinality in organizational psychology. But psychology is also really important because it teaches us to think about not just what people are physically experiencing in the world, but their mindset as they go through that area. And customer experience is about understanding the perception that an individual has of an organization from the first time that they learn about the organization through every interaction and touch point that they have. So we all are in that field of psychology and organizational design, and I do think that it's systems theory, and in our case, aligning those systems to serve the customer, the organization, and the business, that is at the heart of what we do, and that's why I love working with the CXPA community.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Yeah. I think, yeah. So I mean, staying on the subject of psychology and behavior, right? Uh, let's look at it from two angles, right? What is it that you'd look for when you are looking to actually go ahead and hire someone in CX, right? Or what are the right behaviors and thought processes for someone who is in CX or wants to get into CX to build and inculcate, right? That is looking at the CX profession, right? And while looking out, into the world and looking at their customers, how can knowledge of psychology and behavior help a customer success or customer experience professional be better at their job, right? So I think they're both pertinent subjects, right?
Yeah, I love that. I mean, let's start with one really big concept that's extremely important, and that's empathy. The ability to think and relate to an individual and understand the world through their eyes. If I were going to say, what is the first key that we need to have? We need to have empathy connected with curiosity. I think we have to have that willingness. I love the folks that are working in the front line, whether they're in the contact center or at their hotel front desk, or they are the franchise agent that's representing an organization. I love the folks that are interacting and connecting with the customer, because that is where we can really hear what is happening in that person's life, and how the organization is interacting with them. How are we making a positive difference? How are we helping them accomplish their goals? How can we do better in accomplishing them? So, to me, one of the first traits that I look for when we're working for somebody is that empathy, that care, that commitment to making a better outcome. The second element that I think is equally important is somebody who is going to look at things on a systematic level and are going to design and intentionally work to create a better outcome. You mentioned Ritz Carlton. I'll go back to my
Sure.
hotel days. I actually worked at Ritz Carlton, and I worked at another hotel chain at the same time. And the other hotel chain had a motto at the time that was, "Yes, I can." And so what I loved about that was that it was very positive and optimistic. What bothered me about that is it was very reactive. You were
Hmm.
waiting for the customer to say
Yep.
something to you. Ritz Carlton, I would check in the morning, and I was working in the banquets team setting up meeting rooms. And every morning they would come and they would check to make sure that I had four quarters in my pocket, that I had a pad of paper and a pen, and I had matches, because they knew that sometime during the day a guest might ask me, "Do you have change for $1?" I mean, I've been around for a
Wow.
little while, so you still need to make a phone call with a coin. But
Yeah.
that's the difference. How do we design and plan in advance so that we can be proactive and have a scalable solution, rather than waiting for the customer to come to us and looking for a reactive? But regardless, whether proactive or reactive, how do we make sure we always do that with the empathy and care to come up with a better outcome?
Absolutely. See, I totally get that, right? I understand that some of this is about system design and org design and process design, right? But lot of it actually falls down, on the person who's actually executing, right? And they need some inherent qualities to do this well. So how do you look for that, right? And what are the, so empathy is something that you mentioned, right? I mean, can you list out two, three things that you'd really look for as non-negotiables if you are looking to hire someone really good in CX, right? And how do you test for those, right? I mean, it's easy to say that I'm looking for someone who has empathy or displays it, right? But how do you actually test for that with a fair degree of certainty?
Part of it is the interview process. Part of it is the scanning area. It's looking at the person's background to see, have they given of their time, have they exposed themselves through volunteer opportunities, through different spaces, to make sure that they are interacting with a wide range of folks, because diversity is part of our success along the way. The second element is that empathy can be designed and taught. So think about what you're doing as an organization to make sure that you are teaching people to be better listeners. Better listener is a key CX quality. But then also, let's not forget that CX needs to go beyond that individual connection, and it needs to be a leader. And so I would look for, when I'm hiring for a CX leader, I would look for somebody who is really good at storytelling so that they can inspire other people to come along. I would look for somebody who's a strong collaborator so that they can come bring others along with them. And I'd look for somebody who's very resilient, that it recognizes that we are not only going to have those one-on-one moments, but we're going to have that long sustained leadership and change. So,
Hmm.
a question that I would love to ask during a job interview to find a CX leader would be to say, tell me about a time that you knew that your organization was not meeting a customer's expectation, and how did you work to change the system? How did you work to collaborate with others to create a better solution, not just so that one customer is happy, but so that you don't repeat that same problem in the future?
Makes sense. I think so. I think the gist there is that a lot of it, although it might appear to depend on individual inherent qualities, you can actually still train, coach, and design for it, right?
And it is so important that you recognize that customer experience is not about creating a team of superheroes.
Mhm.
CX professionals
Absolutely.
are superheroes, but what their superpower is that they're embedded within an organization that sets the right policies and gives the right tools. Um, I had an
Yeah.
experience over the weekend where I spoke on the phone with a call agent who was extremely talented and extremely empathetic, extremely helpful. But when it boiled down to it, she couldn't help me because the company's financial structure and the way that they bill customers didn't
Hmm.
allow her to make
Absolutely.
the changes that were needed. And
Yeah.
as a result, we had to cancel the order, and I purchased from a competitor.
Yeah.
Um, so you need a CX leader at the top of the organization that is making sure that the marketing is correct, that the sales is correct, that the finance is correct, that operations is
Mhm.
correct, because the customer doesn't care where the breakdown is. The
Absolutely.
customer just wants to have a smooth and easy transaction and that outcome. So, yes, we need a great contact person when we call in with a problem, but equally, we need someone who sent a clear message ahead of time. And we need a reliable product, and we need good delivery. All of those things are part of the customer experience success.
So, very, this is a great point for me to connect this to something else, something I heard in another of your conversations, right? I was going through another interview of yours, and you talked about unicorn moments, right? And how we tend to over-index on those, right? When we talk about CX, right? And I connected that to a very frequently quoted example of a customer experience or of a of a certain customer service person who ordered pizza for their customers while they were on the call. An irate customer on the call, they ordered pizza for them, and the customer was delighted. And this is a fable. This is a fable when the people talk about it very frequently. But then every time I hear it, the question in my mind is, how frequently can you do that? Can you do that with every irate customer? And that I could very clearly connect with your idea of unicorn moments. That's such a great name, great term for that event, right? So I'd love for you to talk about that for a moment.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. I think one of the challenges is that people know the term customer experience. They've heard it. If you go out into Google and you do a search for customer experience, I think you get something like 62 million results in under a second. But do people really understand it? There are a lot of misperceptions, and one of those misperceptions is that customer experience is about creating those exceptional wow moments that make a person feel good so that they share it on social media and that it goes above and beyond the expectations. That can be a part of customer experience, but it's not a substitute. Because the real question is, have we created a experience or a system that can be replicated? Is it profitable? Because when we think about the moment when, I'll give you a very good example. There's a very popular fast food chain here in the U.S. South and across the world now that serves great chicken sandwiches, but does not serve them on Sundays. And that's their values. That's what they've chosen to do. But they've made the exceptions at least twice that I'm aware of. And both were in instances of tragedies in the area. And so they opened on a Sunday to help people recover from a natural disaster. And they opened another time to help serve the people who are responding to a natural disaster. Those are unicorn moments. That's not part of their planned business strategy.
Yeah.
What's nice about unicorn moments is that they do make people feel good and they have a lot of response, but they aren't replicable. Another example, there was a bread truck that was stuck on a highway during a snowstorm. And this was a very severe delay. There were people who were stuck on that highway for 12 hours or more. And somebody called the number on the back of the bread truck and said to the person who answered the phone, could you let the driver open up his truck and feed the people who are around him? This is great. This is almost a biblical story, with somebody feeding the masses. But it's not a replicable business strategy.
Yeah.
It's a great PR stunt. It's a great community service, but it is not replicable for the organization's bottom line. And so the difference between a unicorn moment and a customer experience program is that a customer experience program is designed to be repeated day in and day out, quarter after quarter, year after year, and it's designed to build a sustainable growth pattern rather than just a short attraction of attention and sentiment.
Another way probably I'd look at it is that if you are, correctly culturally aligned, if you have the right processes, you generally increase the probability of a unicorn moment happening, right? So,
yeah, I mean, one of the big things that people want is reliability. You want to know that you're able to go and to get a quality experience in the right time at a fair price. And that's part of customer experience design is to make sure that this happens again and again. If you went into a restaurant and the first time they gave you free dessert, chances are when you go back the second and third time, you're going to expect free dessert
absolutely.
too. So let's be real careful about what systems we're designing. It could be part of your brand, but you have to figure out how you're going to pay for it.
Absolutely. Right. So, Greg, you have been with CXPA for close to 5 years, right? Generally, how has the field of CX changed in the last 5 years, right? So, both the field of CX, people's perception of it, what people expect from it. Could you please talk about that?
Yeah, I am so proud of the CX community over the past 5 years and what's been happening. When I came on board, a lot of the conversation was around respecting different perspectives on what customer experience is. And we still respect that there are a lot of different perspectives. But what we recognized was people were spending all their time arguing back and forth over nuances between the definition. And instead of agreeing on what was the core and how we move that forward. So working together with an international panel, we adopted a series of definitions, which are housed at whatiscx.com. in order to discuss what customer experience means, what customer experience management, what customer experience professional means. But then beyond that, I mean, what incredible people. One of the CX members posted and said, is anyone else interested in writing a book to help people grow their knowledge around customer experience? That little post ended up with 70 different people from around the world publishing the first book of knowledge for customer experience, over 300 pages of the terms, the formulas, the guidance that people will use to run a customer experience program. In addition to that one book, they've written 12 others to talk about how customer experience partners together with marketing and with finance and with operations. And what makes each of those unique is they aren't written by an individual. They are written by a collaborative team that is peer reviewed, and those teams are highly international. And so, we have members in over 75 different countries around the world. We just had our first CCXP from Mongolia the other day. And, I feel like we have arrived when we're discussing the certified customer experience professionals all the way from Mongolia to here in the U.S. in Montana. So it's great to see the international growth and the focus around standards. How do we come together and support the growth of a master's program at Michigan State University and an undergraduate program at Red and Yellow University in South Africa? Because if we want to make sure that customer experience continues to be viewed as a business strategy that is good for customers, good for employees, and good for organizations, we need to have a strong, agreed sense of what we're talking about. And then we need to advance the academic study and advance the research to take us further.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Very interesting, right? So basically two things I take away from that, right? One is that it's an extremely vibrant community, very thriving, vibrant community. And the second probably is, is a lot of focus on standards and defining the field to take it to a lot of clarity in terms of what exactly it means and what it entails, right? So one interesting thing that I took away from your comment is why and how it's important for organizations to see that CX is very important for them, right? It's almost ironical, right? That that you have to educate a company like ours or any company that CX is actually important. But then it starts to make sense when you think about the number of things that are at conflict with CX. And the benefit of a customer in general within a company, right? There is finance, there is this need to make money, which might be at loggerheads, right? And any advice for people who operate businesses like me on how to balance it all?
Yeah, I think that the most dangerous element with running any business is the question of short-term gains versus long-term success. Truth be told, anyone can have a very good quarter, by manipulating the sales numbers and the offers that they put on the table and the energy that they put behind looking at those short-term gains. The challenge is that many of those same tricks that come up with short-term gains are not long-term sustainable. It's the free dessert, it's the unicorn moments. And so that is one area that I think is really important, is to make sure that as an organization and as a leader, that you are committed to making sure that your organization is positioned not just for quarterly success, but is making the investments to ensure the longevity and growth of your company. Customer experience is a great way to do that, both in terms of the sustainable results and in terms of the differentiation, from your competitors. The second thing that I would say is that it does come down to probably two fundamental areas. One is to build into your culture. and to build into your culture that your expectation is that every decision is going to be good for customers, employees, and the organization's bottom line. And if you can't articulate how it's good for all three of those, you probably need to go back to the drawing board and make it better. Refine that solution so that it addresses the part that is missing. The second is that I think it's extremely useful for a company to have a dedicated CX professional or a dedicated CX professional department to work across those different silos in those different areas. I mean, it breaks my heart to think that that company I interacted with over the weekend invested in creating a great digital experience, a great in-store experience, a great delivery experience, and it all broke down because they couldn't figure out how to process a credit card transaction in a way that my credit card company wouldn't flag it as fraud. And so if they had worked all of those pieces together, and sometimes that means working beyond just the finance department. It's working together with the other elements. That is how you drive long term success. Is to make sure that somebody has a remit, has a responsibility to work across the organization to do the journey maps. You see a journey map on the wall there, to say, how does the customer come into the organization? How do they interact? What are the different touch points? And make sure that as you lead that, the purpose is to design those long-term outcomes for the organization, not a short-term quarterly earning, not just a better score on your NPS or your voice of customer metric, but really to say, our goal is to have better long-term results because our customers are happier, our employees are happier, and they're delivering sustainable growth to the bottom line.
It was very insightful, Greg. Right, extremely insightful. I think we are at the end of the time that we had. So I learned a lot, Greg, from this conversation, and
I
very
really
insightful
enjoyed,
speaking to you.
I appreciate that you did the research to ask me great questions.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Greg. So yeah, so we look forward to talking to you again. But thanks again for your time and happy birthday again, Greg.
Thank you very much.